Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 151. So I got a question about how you can model in these kinds of carved numbers and lines. And what I have to say is that it's not really feasible or necessary to actually model it. A better idea would be to create a texture, a black and white texture that we can use as a mask or a bump texture or a displacement map. So I'll show you how we can go ahead and do that. I'll show you two different methods, one inside of Photoshop and one inside of 3ds Max. So what I'll basically do is just go ahead and start with a cylinder. I'll go ahead and give it 32 sides. I'll just go ahead and put it right here in the middle. I won't be recreating this exactly, but I'll be creating something similar. And then it's up to you to take the information you've learned and spend more time to create a more detailed, precise version. So I'll just go ahead and insert two edges here, two loops. I'll go ahead and detach this. I'll go ahead and give this a gray material here. I'll go ahead and extrude inside here. Alright, this will be my inner segment, and I'll be putting some numbers on here. And I'll just go ahead and create a little bit of detail here. And what I'll do here, I think, is instead of using support loops, I will instead just go ahead and chamfer it. So I will go ahead and go 1, 2, 3, 4, loop, and chamfer. There we go. I'll go ahead and just give it one smoothing group. And for this, I'll also go ahead and isolate, extrude inside, bridge, and do the same for this. And I will also go ahead and do the same for here, for the top and the bottom. Alright, so there we are, and then I'll go ahead and apply chamfer to this as well. So this is just a simple object just to test out our techniques. Alright, so here we go. And we can go ahead and spin this around. So basically, the first thing we'll need to do is go ahead and unwrap it. And I'll go ahead and apply unwrap UV modifier. Go into face. I'll go ahead and turn on planar angle. Just select the top here. And I'll go ahead and grow it a little bit. And now I'll go into edit. Change the under map parameters. I'll change this to Z, quick planar map. So basically we are mapping this from the Z axis, which is vertically, so straight down. And I'll do the same for the bottom. Grow, grow, plus, plus, and quick planar map. There we are. Now I will go ahead and turn on the select element feature here. Select both of these. Control I to invert my selection, and now I'll go ahead and turn on cylindrical. Now best align, and then click again to turn it off. Here we are. Whenever you see this happening, it means that it's not properly welded. So just go ahead and Control A, Tools, Weld selected. And you can see it welded too much here. So what we want to do is go under Options, Weld Threshold, let's try 0.001, Tools, Target selected, Weld selected, and there we go. And now it's all connected here. The green line represents the borders, the perimeters. Alright, let's try select inverted faces, Tools, Flip Horizontal. Alright, we have no inverted faces, it looks like. Select overlapped faces. And of course, we definitely want to make sure we have no overlapped faces, otherwise we'll have a problem with our texture. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have none. So since nothing is being selected, that means we're good to go. One thing I want to do though is make sure that this UVW map is properly proportioned. So I'll just go ahead and create a new material here under diffuse. I'll click here, turn on checker, set the tiling to let's say 25 by 25 and apply it here and show standard map in viewport. And as you can see here, we have this stretching happening. So what I will do is select this, turn on the freeform tool, freeform mode, hold shift, and I'll just go ahead and stretch it out here. You can see I'm hovering over the corner. With freeform mode, you can both move, rotate, and scale all in one tool without having to change between these three. So to scale, hover over the corners here, and I'm holding shift to constrain it. So basically I'm going to stretch this out until the checker is perfectly square. Alright, this looks pretty good. So the reason that it's so long here is because it's going all the way around. So now I can go ahead and scale it to fit in the actual box. Now, once you scale it down, it becomes a lot smaller, which means you now have less texture resolution to work with. If you would like to mitigate this effect, what you can do is select half of it, turn off the select element, select half of it, tools, break it off here, move it down here. Now I can go ahead and scale it up. So now you have a lot more texture resolution to work with. So that's just a simple trick to get the most texture resolution. And then I'll go ahead and of course scale this down as well. And here is our texture map. What I will now do is go ahead and render out the actual UVW template. I will go under Tools, Render UVW Template. We have a few basic options here. We have width, height, how large you want this to be. Let's go with 2048. Alright, fill is what will fill the template. Right now the mode is set to none, so nothing will be filled. Although you may wish to go ahead and set it to solid, normal, or shaded, which will give you a texture that has some color inside of the regions, the UV islands here. And here we have the color for the edges. They're alpha, how visible they are. Visible edges, invisible edges, and also the color for the seam edges, which are the borders, the perimeter, the seams. Alright, so I'll go ahead and click on Render UV Template, and here it is. And now click on Save here, and choose an format. Choose a format that supports alpha, like PNG, TIFF, TGA. Although you can use JPEG as well, and just in Photoshop use a blending mode so that it does not get in the way. Alright, and I'll go ahead and see you in Photoshop. Alright, here we are in Photoshop. I'll just go ahead and rename this layer to UV. Alright, it's hard to see right now, so what I'll do is create a new layer, put it below UV, and I'll go ahead and fill it with black here. So now we can clearly see our UVs. And now basically all we need to do now is either import some textures, some images, or we can go ahead and simply use the text tool and switch it to white here and position it right here, for example, and just go ahead and enter our numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.8, and whatever else that you need here. And once you're done, just save it as pretty much any image format will do. You can save it as a format that has high quality, no compression, like PNG. If you save it to JPEG, it may have some artifacts here. So you just want to go ahead and make sure you have a high resolution. Make sure that you use a high quality image format, and then once you're done, just go ahead and save it. Of course, you want to go ahead and maybe turn off the UVs here, so you just have this black background color and white whatever symbol or image or text that you want to have here. So you do want to take a little bit of care and make sure everything is properly lined up if you use this method. For example, remember, since I split the UVs earlier, I'll need to go ahead and make sure that I have numbers here, and then I'll start off on the same position right here in terms of its height. So to give you an example, let's say I have let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm using a font that kind of moves the numbers up and down. Let me go ahead and choose something more basic like Times New Roman or just Arial. 1, 2, 3. So I can go ahead and just put a bunch of numbers here. Okay, so I went ahead and went all the way to 27. So you can basically see how here, how far away it is from this line here. It's a few pixels above it. So when I go ahead and use the text tool to create a new layer here, I want to make sure it's positioned also a few pixels above here. So I'll go ahead and continue with, let's say, 28, 29, 30. So I want to make sure that, first of all, that it's not too far away or too close to here. I want to make sure that it continues right after that. So I just need to go ahead and spend a little bit of time and properly position things. Maybe go under window and character. Here you have a whole bunch of options to change the positioning of your characters. You can make them taller. For example, change this to 200, make it much taller. Make it shorter. Use 80, for example. 25, make it very thin, very short like that. You also have the size, of course, how far the characters are positioned away from each other. So they are now further spaced apart. So you have a whole bunch of options to easily change that. How far apart the letters are on the next line. And a whole bunch of different options here that you can use to properly create text here. So I'm just giving you once again a very quick demonstration. So basically, I want the text down here to be positioned about the same as it is here. So I'll just go ahead and once again here in Photoshop you can also hold Shift to constrain it to a certain direction. Alright, so if you want to have more accuracy, what you can do is just kind of zoom in, and this will kind of give you more accuracy as well, allow you to be more precise. You can also use the ruler to create guides. So basically, to activate the rulers, just go under View, Rulers, and to use them, just go ahead and where the numbers are, click and hold and drag to create a ruler, which is this blue line right here that you can use to position your text, and it will kind of snap to it. So that is a nice feature that you can use. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that it is positioned about the same. Right now it looks like it's a little bit too high, like maybe a pixel too high, so I may want to position it a little bit down. Alright, so now I can go ahead and continue with the numbers until I get all the way to the end. Alright, and here I've got the text here. So here it goes from 1 to 27, and here it goes from 28 to 54. Alright, and now I'll just go ahead and turn off the UV and save this as, let's say, PNG, for example. And one more thing you can actually do, you can do this both in Photoshop and 3ds Max, is I can go ahead and, let's say, rasterize this and rasterize this as well. Let me go ahead and Control E to combine them together. And I can go under Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur to blur a little bit, blur the edges a little bit. This will kind of give you a different displacement or bump effect. Alright, and one more cool thing you can do in Photoshop is, first of all, go ahead and right click and duplicate the layer. I can go under Filter, Artistic, and choose any of these effects, like let's say palette knife. And what this actually does, it's a little bit hard to see, but it will apply various filters to that Photoshop has access to. And what you can do is you can create an effect of, like, let's say some of these numbers being scratched out or damaged. So this is a very easy way to apply damage to your texture. So you can play around with the settings here to get all sorts of interesting results. Play around with the stroke size, the stroke detail. Alright, let's go ahead and try this and see what we get. And as you can see, some of the numbers have been chipped away a little bit. So let me go ahead and drag this down so we can see the comparison. Alright, and you can see how with these settings, some of the parts have been chipped away. It's very gradual here. So you can see, for example, with the 5, see how here without the filter, it's like this, and with the filter, parts of it have been kind of chopped up. So you can see that we get a pretty cool effect where some of the paint has been chipped and damaged. So this depends on what kind of effect you're trying to achieve. Sometimes whenever there's this kind of detail, we have both an indentation and a painting as well. So I'm going to go ahead and undo, and I will try using the filter with slightly different settings, and I'll get back to you once I've gotten that. Alright, and here I have changed the settings, changed the stroke detail. You can see that basically more of it has been chipped away. So let's go ahead and compare real quick. So you can see how there's some nice edge damage in a lot of these numbers. So basically, if you're trying to create an effect where something has been engraved and painted, what you want is, you want to go ahead and use this for the actual bump map or the displacement map, but then you want to go ahead and use this for the diffuse part, for the diffuse texture. So basically the paint has been chipped away, but the actual physical engraving is still there. So if you're looking at something like a license plate, we have an actual physical indentation here, so that no matter how scratched or damaged it gets, the physical indentation will still be there, so you can still tell what the number is. So basically here, even though the paint has been chipped away and damaged, the physical indentation remains. So basically, I will go ahead and save 2 images, one for the bump map and one to use for the diffuse map. And there are other filters you can use. For example, you can go ahead and maybe use, let's say, the smudge stick. So with smudge stick, you get this kind of effect, kind of a lot more damage here as well. So you can use a variety of filters. Just go ahead and experiment with all the filters Photoshop has to offer to get some nice damage effect. And one more thing is you can also go ahead and easily create more detail by importing images into Photoshop as well. So I've got this image of some wings. I don't remember where I found it, but here it is. And basically what I'll do first of all is I can go ahead and use the magic wand tool, set the appropriate tolerance level here. I think the default is 32. I can go ahead and select it and delete this. There are still a few kind of white parts here, but I'll just go ahead and go under Image, Adjustments, and Invert to get this. And I can go ahead and position this where I would like it to be. So I want to make sure that it does not go over the boundary, so I can go ahead and go under Image, Edit, Transform, Scale, hold Shift so that it keeps the proportions. Well, let me go ahead and scale it a little bit more. I want to make sure that it fits between these lines here, about like that. Alright, and I can also use various Photoshop filters to add some damage here. Another way by adding damage, to add damage, you can also import a texture of some scratches. So I'll go ahead and find an image of a texture of some scratches, and I'll go ahead and import it into Photoshop and show you what you can do with it. Okay, so here's just an image of some textures that I've got here. first thing I can do is go under Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. And I can go ahead and use a blending mode like Multiply. Alright, right now it just kind of makes everything a little bit more gray. So what I can do is I can go ahead and use Image Adjustments, use either levels or curves to change the settings, to change the way the texture looks. To make the darker parts a little darker and the whiter parts whiter. And just kind of work with this until you get the result that you like. So you can kind of destroy some parts of your texture of your numbers using this as well. So I can use this for my bump map, and then for example use this for my diffuse map to show the paint being destroyed and eroded. Although I probably need to go ahead and make some parts, tweak it a little bit more to make some parts brighter. So I have something more like this. Just take this white tab here and move it all the way to the left here to get this. So we can see that some parts have been kind of damaged and destroyed, have been scratched. Alright, so now I'll see you back in 3ds Max. Alright, and here we are back in 3ds Max. Now just go ahead and right click and collapse to. Now we've got editable poly. I'll go ahead and apply this gray material. I'll go under bump and select bitmap, and I'll navigate to the folder and select that image that we just created in Photoshop. Alright, it has been applied. I'll go ahead and click on this button right here to show standard map in viewport, and here we are. What I can do is go under here, flat, to see just the texture, and we can see that it's looking pretty good. I want to make sure that it has lined up correctly, so I'll go here, and it looks like it has lined up pretty well. So there we go. Now I've got numbers going all the way around. Nice and simple and easy. Okay, so right now it's set to bump 30. So 30 is, it may be too strong or too weak of a value for what you're going for. And if you'd like to set it to displacement, you can just go ahead and drag this over to displacement. But mostly I find that bump does the job. If you're working on a movie, for example, you will be using displacement because you need to get the highest quality possible. But if you're just working on a personal project, I find that bump and normal maps will do just fine. There's not much of a noticeable difference. Alright, so let's see what it looks like with a bump of 30. I will just go ahead and create two quick Omni lights here. One up here, and I'll hold shift to make another clone right here. Alright, so I will do a quick render and we'll see what kind of results we got. Okay, and here's the result. As you can see, it looks pretty good. And of course, if we had this set to displacement, we would get even better result, especially on the edges here. You can kind of tell it's a bump map because the edges aren't really popping out, but we don't really need them to because we're doing a very light effect here. So this is 30. I may want to go ahead and decrease it to, let's say, 5 to get a more subtle effect. So let's go ahead and try rendering with this, and I'll come back to you once that's done. Now before I render with the new settings, what I will first do is click on these little two people here. This will clone rendered frame window. This will create a clone of whatever you have rendered here. So this way you can very easily do comparisons. And now I'll go ahead and click render here, and we'll get the result of the new changes that we made to the bump strength. Okay, and here is the new render right here. This is a strength of 30, and this is a strength of 5. As you can see, I think it looks a lot better. It's a lot more subtle, and we have a nice effect here. Alright, what I can also do is go ahead and enter a negative number here. So if I enter a -5, for example, it will take all the brightness of the pixels here and invert that. So I'll go ahead and create another clone here. I can go ahead and delete this one, and I'll go ahead and re-render that, and we'll see what kind of effect we get. Okay, so here is a value of +5, and here is -5. You can see that we get a pretty nice effect of the numbers being engraved inside. Alright, now let's go ahead and take a look at the diffuse side of things. I will go ahead and click on diffuse. First of all, I'll go ahead and right click and actually copy this, and I'll go ahead and create a composite map. Alright, for here I'll just go ahead and select a random metal texture that I have. Alright, so here is the texture that I've used. It's just this kind of generic, slightly rusty, dirty metal texture. Alright, so I've put that right here. I'll go ahead and add a new layer. I'll go ahead and paste that in here. So I went ahead and pasted that mask that I made. But remember, I want to go ahead and use the different texture with the damage for my diffuse, because I want some of the paint to be eroded. So I'll simply go ahead and choose the mask texture instead. Alright, so now I am using my mask texture, and here it is right here. You can see some of the parts have been worn out here. The 1, 2, 3 all the way to 9 has more damage than the others. So it's a little bit more damage in these parts. Alright, so what will happen now is if I render this, the texture will be completely black. So I'll go ahead and render it and you see what happens. Alright, as you can see now, the object is completely black, because what has happened now is that this mask has completely overridden this. What I instead want to do is I only want the white to be visible in the white areas. So what I'll simply do is I'll click and hold and drag this right over here. So we will now be using this as a mask. So basically, wherever there is white, it will be visible. Wherever there is black, it will be invisible. And of course this works on the gray scale. So if it's 50% gray, it will be 50% visible. So if a texture here, if a pixel is 50%, if it is perfectly gray here, it will be only half visible, whatever is over here. Alright, so now if I re-render this, only the white parts will be visible, and I'll let you see what happens. Alright, and here is the effect that we get. You can see that the metal texture is fully visible. The bump map is in effect, and you can see that some of the parts have been scratched out. Although it doesn't really make sense right now, what I would need to do to make this make sense is I would need to go ahead and set this to a positive value. So I'll go ahead and set this to positive 4, for example, and I'll go ahead and re-render that. Alright, it makes more sense now, and the reason for that is because since there is a slight bump here, there's a much greater chance that the paint will be scratched off, and now we have a nice effect. We have a bump happening here, giving some depth to this geometry, to this object, and we also have some scratches happening here where the object has been scratched. So we get some very nice effects happening here, and we can go ahead and create whatever kind of images, numbers, or text that we want here using this very simple method. And one more cool thing you can add is that right now I've got bump set to 4. Right over here we have something called blur, which we can use to blur our image. We can also go ahead and decrease the blur and just make it 0.01. By default it's set to 1. So this is what the image looks like. This is the render we get when we have a blur setting of 1, the default. I'll go ahead and set the blur to something like 4, and I'll go ahead and re-render. Alright, and here is my clone, and you can definitely see that it's looking a lot blurrier here, which you can also use to control the blurriness of your bump or your displacement. So thank you for watching, and take care.